All right, welcome into the next edition of the Vegas Squares podcast. We are sitting here with a full studio. I got Spike, I got Token Tony, and I got Tony Johnson sitting with me. And it's been a hell of a week in sports. Football came back, which I know all of us are excited about. And college football is coming back soon, but not without its share of scandal. It seems that the newest one to hit the books here now since we've talked is Urban Meyer, who I've never been a huge fan of, but I will give credit as a great coach. I got Spike, Token Tony, and Tony Johnson, and since no one cares how they're doing, thanks, Spike. I'll start this off with Token Tony, because after Aaron Rodgers not being a Tier 1 quarterback hot take, I can't wait to hear what he has to say next. Token Tony, what are your thoughts initially when this Urban Meyer scandal, or if it turns into a scandal, whatever word you want to use.
Investigation right
now. What are your thoughts initially on what we have been given as far as the timeline to this?
Sounds like a reason just to kind of look to get rid of him almost, I mean, in my mind. You're hearing one thing from one person, and his wife's coming out repeatedly saying she's got a text message or something like that, right?
Yeah, that is, it's hard to really say at this point what time, because, Urban Meyer has already been considered a liar at this point, so, his credibility could be his credibility could be considered shot at this point. Spike, I know you love college football, so naturally I probably should have gone to you first because you've got a wealth of knowledge in this legal field.
Clearly, yeah. Appreciate that.
You do know a little bit about college, how colleges operate, and a situation here internally that, there's a really big black eye on Ohio State right now.
Well, yeah, and you got to realize, too, that in many cases, the head football coach at a public university might be the highest paid public employee in the state. So it's not like these guys can get away with doing anything without, I shouldn't say that. They can get away with little things like DUIs and, kind of the little things that don't really involve other people. They can get pretty well buried. But something like this, especially in this era of the Me Too movement and of the publicity these events are getting, and when somebody even kind of looks like they were covering up an incident of domestic violence, especially multiple incidents of domestic violence, because it sounds like the allegations are many times over 6 years, that, you can't get away with that anymore.
Right, and as of this point, Ohio State has formed a committee, which you know how much I love college committees.
Oh, yes.
To head up the investigation. Token, I got to kind of disagree with you on the point of looking for a way to get rid of him. I'll flip this over to the other Tony Johnson. In my opinion, forming this committee with a lot of people who have ties to Ohio State, to me it seems like they're meeting with anyone and everyone who can figure out a way to keep Urban Meyer. Because in my opinion, I think that's, a guy who's gone, I believe, 75-8 over his tenure at Ohio State. If he had been the one to physically abuse a woman, I think that there's a no-brainer here. But I think because of where his place in this alleged crime is, his part of the story, I think this board of committee or trustees, whatever it is actually trying to find a way to keep Urban Meyer and have the least amount of damage control to have to do.
That would be my guess as well. I assume that the goal is to, I wouldn't say sweep under the rug per se, but yeah, do as little public damage and continue to keep the boosters and everybody else as happy as humanly possible, and then still play the season out as they are. In full disclosure, I will say I have a large future wager on Ohio State to win both the Big Ten and to win the national championship. So I'm a little disheartened by all of this news and information that has gone down. But so I kind of have to stand in a positive sense here. Not that I'm a fan of Ohio State in general, but I'm holding out hope in the sense that my bet doesn't just go up in total flames. Because if Meyer is certainly fired, I think the season will end up being probably lost for the most part.
Well, that's actually a good question because, I mean,
despite the talent, and
that's what I say, the talent on that team.
They have the best talent in the nation, in my opinion. If we look for depth from like 1s to 4s, they're unquestionably the most talented team in the nation.
Okay, so let's look at that. What does Urban Meyer provide that gets them over the top that you feel that much better about a futures ticket? And I don't want to get too far off of the actual story here, but what about Urban Meyer? Obviously, the ability to navigate a football season is one of great difficulty. If he is suspended for any period of time, especially if it's a year or more, or subsequently fired, you don't think that this talent has the ability to at least get you close or in the playoff, or you think this is just too much for a team like this of kids?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, they are so talented and so good that it is possible, but I just, for long-term wise in recruiting, it won't be ideal because he's best certainly as a recruiter and promoter, better than really a coach on the field. I think he's a fine coach on the field, but
sure, but your ticket only goes 1 year.
Exactly. No, I understand that. I don't think this team needs necessarily a great coach on the field to win a national championship. But if you have a coach that is subsequently fired, and then you have all this, we have maybe more allegation or other things come out as well. Teams generally aren't able to survive that, no matter how good you are. There's just too much going on the outside. So that would be my own take on it. But talent-wise, they are certainly head and shoulders above the great majority of Division I teams. Not all of them, but quite a few.
Now, a lot of people, Spike, are liking this to the Joe Paterno situation. Obviously, I would imagine you're familiar with that, even though college football is not your great area of expertise, like I lied earlier.
Yeah, I may have heard a thing or two about that, yes.
Now, a crime, many people believe a crime is a crime is a crime. I mean, obviously, we don't hold somebody as accountable for speeding as we do for somebody who murders. That's just basic fact. However, I struggle to see a little bit of the situation, like you said, the Me Too movement has come on strong, etc. The domestic violence is a very hot button issue in today's climate. But Joe Paterno, whether you believe it or not, knew about sexual misconduct with children and didn't report it. And whether you believe Urban or not, at this point he knew about some ongoing domestic violence and didn't report it. I have a hard time linking those two. But I'm not trying to downplay one crime or over the other, but I have a hard time believing that really Urban Meyer should be as auto-fired as many people believe at this point, if he did not do this reporting up the chain of command like he says he did.
Right. I think the problem that Urban Meyer is going to run into is that the NCAA and universities are sort of under their own, I don't want to say legal system because that's not technically right, but whenever some shit goes down, it's kept in-house. Like at my alma mater, actually one of the reasons that I no longer donate to my alma mater is because there was an issue of sexual abuse on campus. It was actually a male-on-male sexual abuse. The accused, after denying it originally, finally came out and admitted that he raped another guy, and he was sentenced to academic probation and counseling. Wow. So at that point I said, you're never getting another fucking dime out of me because I just can't stand it. But that case never saw the true United States legal justice system. So it never went to a court of law, never had a jury, never had anything like that. It was handled in-house. And that is the problem that Urban Meyer is going to run into here, is that universities handle shit in-house. For better or worse, that's the way that they're going to do things. So that was what Joe Paterno ran into, is, universities are subject to certain reporting policies that administrators have to follow, and any kind of breakdown in that is going to be a major, major problem for the person that didn't report it. And I know that the commission is coming in, and it was, it was put together by Ohio State, but it's being led. First of all, it's being led by a woman who's not going to be kind if it turns out that somebody did not report domestic violence against a woman. But it's not like she's a slouch either. She's a former federal prosecutor and former head of the SEC. And that's the Securities and Exchange Commission, not the Southeast Conference.
No, I was with you.
So it's a college football
But yes,
talk. So
yeah, you're right. No.
We have to clarify that.
And Urban Meyer came from the SEC. That's a good statement for sure.
So, I mean, this is the kind of thing where it's not going to be levels. It's not going to be gray area. It's not going to be, it's not going to be like, well, if this happened, then let's get him a lawyer. Let's do this, that, and the other thing. Let's kind of put him through the system. No, if he didn't report it, he fucked up, and he is going to have consequences.
Now, define reporting it, because I mean, is this something where you have to fill out paperwork, or is reporting it as simple as saying, okay, so I'm Urban and you're, I believe Gene Smith is the athletic director, and they say, hey, look, I think this is going on. You may want to check it. And then you're Gene, you say, okay, I'll get into it, and then that's...
So, yeah, and that, it would be... And I'd have to look because I don't know if domestic violence falls under Title IX, but...
I believe it does. I mean, that's the words I've heard.
So, yeah, it's basically, he either has to report it to a higher-up, which in this case would be an athletic director, or he has to report it to every university... or every college university has a Title IX officer.
Okay.
And that's usually a designee within the Office of Human Resources. It could be anybody, though. But typically it's in Human Resources, and they have special training to deal with shit like this. So if somebody comes to them and says, I know of domestic violence happening, that goes to the Title IX officer, and then they have a bunch of procedures that they have to follow. So if Urban Meyer did that, and then nothing came of it, I think Urban Meyer is going to be clear.
Okay.
I think he will be fine. But if he didn't, if he just tried to handle this within the football system and didn't go to an athletic director and didn't go to the Title IX officer, that is where he's going to face problems.
Well, the reason I ask is because with this committee and with this woman you're speaking of and the court of public opinion, I feel like the burden of proof is on Urban Meyer at this point to prove that he did do it. And if it's a verbal exchange between he and the Title IX officer, he and the athletic director, if it's legitimately strictly just, hey, check this out, or hey, I'm just letting you know, that could be a problem for Urban Meyer to try to prove.
Yeah, that's going to be an issue, which is why, they say in the military, and basically it's smart for everybody in business, cover your ass.
Yeah.
If you have a conversation, send an email afterwards following up and say, as per our conversation, ...
Always get it right.
X, Y, Z.
Exactly.
So, now, Token, this happened at Florida as well, and apparently that was reported. Allegedly, that was reported to the proper authorities at Florida. So, bringing this guy back on staff, and this has continued this string of alleged abuse. Again, I say alleged because the cops were called 10-plus times to the Smith household, but actually no arrest was ever made. So, I mean, we've got almost a decade of incidents or a decade of evidence to come out with. I mean, at some point, if you're Urban Meyer, do you either how do you not sit this guy down or tell him he needs to go get some help? Because, I mean, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but, I mean, I'm sure if somebody did some digging, if it did actually exist, we would see, what's his name? Smith. What's his first name? Anybody know?
Zach?
Drawing a blank. Zach Smith. We would see an article or a blurb somewhere that says, Ohio State or Florida assistant coach Zach Smith has been placed on leave or has sought counseling or something. I mean, I understand, college football coaches are all about the game, winning the game, because that's obviously their livelihood. But,
yeah.
I mean, what do we make of this? I mean, we're talking about almost a decade of alleged assault and at two different institutions. And it seems weird that Urban Meyer would report one at Florida and wouldn't report one at Ohio State.
Yeah, that does seem kind of a little odd.
Because, I mean, we have other Tony. We have confirmed reports that he did report at Florida. So what would be going through Urban Meyer's mind if he reported it the first time? Obviously, Zach Smith probably just got a slap on the wrist or a, hey, let's tone it down, or let's deal with this in-house. But what are your thoughts on why he would do it one way and then not do it the other way when, I mean, I don't know how good Zach Smith is of a coach. I mean,
recruiting, unbelievable.
Is that okay? So as a good recruiter,
they also go way back too.
Sure, absolutely. They go back all the way to Bowling Green, right?
Gave Urban his first job as a coach.
So okay,
that's why this goes down, and he was like a second father to him. He said that a couple of times in years past.
I mean, I wonder maybe why he didn't go to Zach. I mean, unless Zach's father's dead, I don't know that.
He is still alive
for a fact. I mean, it just seems like. Oh, that's right. Earl Bruce's grandson. That's what the whole big story is.
Yep.
It just seems like there's a loyalty that went too far at this point.
That's very likely what happened. And again, I hate to be the sort of conspiracy theorist sort of thing in this realm, but I wouldn't trust a whole lot of what's being said and what was done, what wasn't done. I'm in the thought that this guy is an elite coach at his peak and has many years remaining, and I think the last thing that Ohio State would want is for them to lose Urban Meyer in whatever way, shape, or form, whether they have to fire him, whether he has to be fired, released by this committee or what have you, or anything legally. My guess is that needs to be avoided at all costs. It is a win-first mentality. It's not really all that pretty, college athletics, and I would assume that it's damage control, and that's the number one goal.
And I'm glad you spoke to that. It's a win or be killed mentality at this point. But when these situations come out, impermissible benefits, sexual assault,
yes,
domestic violence, etc., we tend to bring them out so far and try to. It's the same. I liken it similarly to the steroid era. I know they're very different points, but they seem to be similar. When the steroid era was in full in baseball, we were rooting, we were cheering. The MLB was promoting these guys. You have McGuire, Sosa, Caminetti, Bonds, allegedly, Palmeiro, all these guys. They're hitting home runs by the 50 home run seasons.
Yeah.
And we're promoting them, we're cheering them, we're celebrating them. And then when it comes out that this Mitchell report, all the steroid allegations and everything is found out it's rampant, I mean, the MLB literally just turns its back on these guys when they made so much off of them.
Yeah, they flipped the switch, literally.
Yeah, it seems like schools are willing to do internally almost whatever it takes to win, because wins equal money. And then when things like this happen, they're very quick to leave, Coach X, Coach Y, Player Z out in the cold to fend for themselves at this point, because Ohio State's been really quiet about it, which makes me wonder, because Gene Smith, who the athletic director is, hasn't come out one way or the other. It makes me wonder how high up the chain this actually goes, and if Urban Meyer is fired or kept, someone feels like they've got to be liable for this.
Sure seems like it for sure, I mean.
So if Urban Meyer did report this question's for everybody, where does the burden fall at this point?
Probably goes up the ladder to who he reported it to, and...
Well, I'd imagine that Title IX guy's not risking his job for just leaving it alone. Or girl, I'm sorry. I mean, it could be either one. But,
right. Yeah, no, it's... you almost hate to say it, but sometimes shit does get lost in the paper shuffle. And if, reports were filed properly, and if, this person kind of started the process and then stopped, or if there was something that kind of got in the way of finishing these reports, then that's going to look bad for that officer.
Now, what I've read so far is that there's basically a 2-week timeline for getting a decision, because, I mean...
Season starts.
Yeah, the season's getting ready to start. And as much as we want to focus on everything off the field, well, Ohio State wants everyone to start focusing on what's going on the field. So we expect to have a decision, within, let's see, it's the 5th now. It's
the 19th.
When's this article dated? The article dated the 4th. So, yeah, 18th, 19th or so here. And I believe the season starts on the 30th, I think. So...
couple of games a few days before that, but the main season, yes.
Okay, so there you go. So the season basically starts at the end of this month. And, I mean, is this really legitimately like a full-blown firing or a stay? Or could there be something in the middle? Half-season suspension, 2-game suspension? I mean, is this an all-or-nothing situation?
I'm nodding over here. I believe it's
He's over in the corner.
I'm just in the corner, banished in the corner.
Sitting on a recliner.
Yeah, that's true. No, comfortable corner. Nothing against it. But,
Comfortable banishment. All right.
my guess is exactly what you were saying towards the tail end of that, is there's probably some sort of suspension, maybe a game, maybe a couple of games. We clearly know that usually the first couple of games are relatively meaningless. I do know they travel to Fort Worth.
You got TCU in that mix, don't they?
TCU, although TCU I think is a little bit weaker than normal.
Normal years.
Yeah, they're already a 17-point favorite, I think, in that game. So my guess is it would be some sort of smallish suspension along those lines. They're going to ask him to apologize for whatever, XYZ, and he'll do that publicly, and then I think they're going to hope that everybody just moves on because the season starts and the money rolls in.
Yeah, once that news cycle clicks over to the season actually starting, I think this goes away.
I agree.
Yeah, I could definitely see.
Isn't that a problem, though? I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend that I'm so heavily involved in or invested in this story, but when it comes to issues like domestic violence, when you say, "Oh, the season started, this will just go away," I mean, that doesn't seem like the right
No, it's horrible.
mentality.
It's a terrible thing. I agree with you.
It kind of just
horrible.
disappears, kind of gets swept.
But that happens.
Unfortunately, the reality.
That happens a lot. And look, I'm not advocating for any one side here on any situation. But it seems like that's the way our news cycle is programmed now. It's like after 2 or 3 days, you just kind of, like you said, the season can't come fast enough for Urban Meyer at this point.
Right. And no matter what the outcome of this investigation is, no matter what the punishment may be, there is going to be a contingent of people unhappy.
Sure.
Like, if he gets away, if it's found that he has done nothing wrong, like if he did the proper reporting and that he is kind of getting off scot-free, people are going to say, well, he should be suspended for even hiring this scumbag in the first place. Excuse me. If he gets fired, then there's going to be a bunch of people saying, well, you're overreacting, you're having a hysterical reaction to something that may or may not have, he had no direct contact with. Like, Urban Meyer wasn't the one hitting this woman.
Even if he knew about it, he didn't hit the woman.
Right. So, you're going too far. If it's a suspension, that people are going to say, well, you're just kind of doing that to save face. You're not actually taking this seriously enough. So no matter what happens, there is going to be a contingent of people that are mad. But we all know hysteria dies down. We all know that, there's going to be something else for people to get outraged about. There's going to be some other shit that happens. So, I assume Roger Goodell will manage to fuck something up before the NFL season starts. So that'll take over the news cycle within, the ESPNs and the other sports news outlets of the world. So this is going to eventually go away. It's just right now Urban Meyer is in the shit. And it's just, it's kind of, he may or may not have made his own bed.
Now, when you were talking there, I thought of a situation where you said, basically, the contingency of people who will be upset and, when this happens. The question I have is, okay, if this situation between Courtney and Zach Smith goes to trial and it's found out... Now, if he's suspended, if Urban Meyer's suspended and it's found out this guy is actually not guilty of all crimes, you can't take the suspension away. But if it comes out that he doesn't get suspended or gets suspended for 2 games, and it comes out that this guy is guilty of one or multiple counts of this domestic abuse, can this be a double jeopardy situation where he could actually then end up getting fired? Hey, look, this happened, and stuff comes out in the court case that turns out, goes against Urban Meyer. Can this be a situation where, hey, we suspend you for 6 games, and then a year and a half down the road, all of a sudden, all the findings come out, and now we've got more information or new information? Because this isn't actually a court of law. This is a court of public opinion.
Right.
Could he still be fired down the road from this?
I mean, anything's possible, but...
Does that seem a little more far-fetched?
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing where it sounds like, Urban Meyer was told that something happened, and the question is whether or not Urban Meyer reported it. So it's, the investigation will happen.
The question is which time. I mean,
Right.
There's been 10-plus incidents just at Ohio State.
And that's sort of going to be the question, but Yeah, I can't imagine a situation where this investigation would miss something like, he was told an 11th time, and that's going to be the reason that instead of a 6-game suspension, he gets fired 2 years later.
Well, the reason, to be honest with you, since this story is broken, I feel like my what's the word I'm looking for? My opinion on this has gone complete 180. Because my initial thoughts were, you know what, he didn't hit the woman, yeah, he's an idiot, he's a bonehead, slap him on the wrist. But now the more I think about it, the more I'm like, it's really not just this, it's a collection of things. It happened at Florida. He brought him to Ohio State. It happened at Ohio State. At Florida, 30-plus players were arrested during his time at Florida. I mean, it's a snowball effect for me. And look, I hate the University of Florida, just being who I am. So that may have a bias in this. However, trying to take as much bias out as possible, this guy has had a snowball chain of just problems off the field during his time as coach, and he seems to. I have friends because I was at Florida State during the time that Urban Meyer was at Florida, and trust me, that was a awful 4 years. but that being said, there was guys like Aaron Hernandez. I know he wasn't a murderer then, but he was a pretty big idiot back in the day. Brandon Spikes, Percy Harvin was another one. Cam Newton during his time, at Florida under Urban Meyer, stole a computer during that time. I know that's very small potatoes, but I'm just saying the snowball effect of there was a sense among. I had some friends who worked in the athletic department at Florida who. Basically, there was a sense among that if you were good at football, and I know this is everywhere, you get away with whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, he's a scumbag, but, he wins games, so he's still going to find a job.
The question, I guess what I'm having is if he was still at Florida at this point, would that be enough of a snowball to just say, hey, look, this may not be that big of an allegation, but, dude, you've got such a train wreck of track record here at this point.
Yeah, and that would probably get him fired from Florida, in which case he would get a job at a place like Ohio State. So,
well, maybe it's time for Urban to have another heart attack or something. But I don't know. It's just the more, and I don't want to sit here and say wait for all the facts to come out because that would make for a very boring podcast. but with the information that we have right now, I think that Urban's got to get some kind of punishment. However, I'm not all the way to the fact of him being completely terminated from the school. I don't know if anybody shares that sentiment or completely disagrees with me, but I'm sorry for your ticket there, sir. But
Actually, I have a question because I don't bet futures. So now with this evidence comes out, like let's say
they're off the board now. Currently.
So could you go in and say, I don't want this ticket anymore and get your money back, or are you stuck?
All bets are action, unless it says otherwise. And I did check this because I made both of them. I have them to win the Big Ten as well. Made both of them about 3 or 4 weeks ago, a couple days apart, and they are all bets action. So it's a full go.
Wow.
I'll jump in on that, and he's 95% correct on that. I believe him. In a situation like this where a major change happens, some books could be a little more, open to giving you your action back.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not all, and I'm not saying that they have to.
Right.
I'm just saying that some
just
of them,
more of a PR thing for the book.
For the book, a PR thing to say, hey, look, we don't condone domestic violence. We don't condone the actions that Urban Meyer took. We'll give you guys your bets back.
Interesting.
Yeah. But right now, from what I know right now, Ohio State's futures odds are off.
Wow. Okay.
It's a big deal. I agree with the offset. And if I ran a sports book, I'd have them off too. I think it's not. This is not just a random assistant coach or a player that's out. They could lose any player, and it really wouldn't matter all that much. He's probably the most important part of the team.
Actually, at Westgate, I think they're still on. But
okay.
Yeah.
Not surprising.
Well, Westgate's probably. Depending on how much handle they have. If the thing is if people are really still wanting to bet, given the fact that Urban Meyer may be fired, I guess you could leave it there. I guess. I don't know.
It's plus 850, so that's.
Well, what do you have him at, Tony? If you don't mind.
Yes, I have 8.25 to win the national championship, and the best one by far is plus 158 to win the Big Ten. I think that line is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
So you're looking at the Westgate right now, Token?
Yeah.
And you have 850?
Plus 850, yeah.
How wild is that? I'm looking at the app for the Westgate, and they're plus 600.
What?
I'm looking on superbook.com.
A couple podcasts ago, and
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
I mean, what they have on the app and what they have. I guess that's
Probably on the Westgate then.
I guess that would be the convenience fee. If you don't want to come down to the Superbook, you're gonna pay 20 or $2 on the.
Wow.
Do you have it available for the Big Ten championship? See if it's different on there.
Conference championships. Let's see the AAC. What is it? The Big Ten.
Big Ten, yeah.
Big Ten. I have plus 125.
Yeah, I have plus 200 here.
What the fuck?
Whoa, 200.
Jesus.
Oh, there you go, Tony Johnson. You got robbed.
I'm going to the Westgate after this. Though.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, that's a great line.
I've been still waiting for my Spurs ticket, dude. Token, what's up, man?
I brought it to you today.
Motherfucking dick. All right, anyways, with all that being said over the last, 30 minutes about Urban Meyer, there is good news. Football's back.
Yes.
Well, I thought you guys would be more excited.
Hooray!
There we go.
I'm excited. I've been excited since the Hall of Fame game, I guess.
It's hard to get excited about the Hall of Fame game, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a step in the right direction.
It's the first action on the field, absolutely. Well, let's talk about. I don't want to deep dive in the Hall of Fame game because that's just fun for no one. But there was a dynamic player who actually made me watch the Hall of Fame game for the first time in. That may be ever. I don't know if I've ever watched the Hall of Fame game before.
It was Joe Flacco.
It was Joe Flacco. Actually, no, it was RG3. It was actually the combination of RG3 and Lamar Jackson, and I don't know if any of you guys watched it or watched.
I kind of watched it. I had actually some action on it, too.
Well, good, because that'll bring me to my next point.
Actually, wait, that's not a bad idea, though, because I've heard preseason football is the easiest to bet on because it's the only time of year where coaches tell you what they're going to do before the game. They tell you what the plan is. They tell you when they're going to take players out.
It's a taste of something to expect, yeah.
I actually don't disagree with that because you're right. They're basically full frontal at that point as far as their strategy. And that was a weird
I was going to
analogy
say,
for that.
That's such a bad mental image.
Yeah, especially in today's day and age.
Think about that.
You got Sandusky'd. They're basically full disclosure on what they're going to be doing as far as scouting players and building their team. I feel like the betting preseason is a dog's paradise at that point because no one really gives a shit about winning, so they're going to generally keep it close.
Unless if you're John Harbaugh, or that's about who cares about winning in preseason.
You mean Jim Harbaugh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why he's not in the NFL anymore. But, goddamn, I lost my... Oh, anybody have a thought on... I know let's not make too much of his career after one start, but I thought Lamar Jackson, despite a couple of inaccuracies, looked pretty decent in that game.
Yeah, the thing for me that he kind of looked a little worrisome about the change from NCAA to NFL is the gripping of the football. I know in NCAA they have more gripping and all that on the balls.
It's a smaller football.
Well, it's a smaller football, plus there's more gripping on it physically. Like even the white stripes on the balls have some tackiness on them. In NFL,
Your white stripes on your balls have tackiness on them, too.
yeah.
This just took a turn.
No,
To the left.
But NFL, it's a little more slick.
Is that true? I didn't know that. I thought balls were doctored up to, the specific quarterback's liking. Let's not get down that road. But I thought balls were kind of scuffed up and made.
In college, they're built to whatever team orders the balls, and they have it towards a certain quarterback's hand where it's a little easier for them to grip within reasonableness. In NFL, they're more strict with their guidelines and all that, but they need to be more broken in to have a better grip on them. There's more film around them.
Okay. Well, the real situation is that Tony, the Ravens in their mind have three quarterbacks who inevitably all three could start week one if that situation came to fruition. I know that's one game. Are we expecting to see a lot more out of Lamar Jackson this preseason in terms of, and do they really feel like he's got a viable shot to start week one at this point?
Are we talking Lamar Jackson starting?
Well, what I'm saying is that, in the court of public opinion of fans, everyone's ready to see Lamar Jackson because the backup quarterback's always the most popular quarterback until he actually has to step on the field.
Right.
I understand, like I said, he only played, I believe, about a little less than a half of football, or a little more than a half of football, and didn't look terrible, and obviously that's his first action, but do you think that a guy like that, because I still think he may be the closest, him and Josh Rosen, who were of the five quarterbacks picked in the first round, they were the last two. I still think those two have the best shot at seeing the field the earliest. So what I'm asking is basically, do you think that the Ravens are going to take this preseason, because they know what they have with Joe Flacco? I mean, are they going to take this preseason to actively look more towards Robert Griffin, or are they going to actively look towards implementing Lamar Jackson in this offense? And actually, before you answer that, ultimately using one of Token's favorite formations, the two-quarterback offense.
Hey, it will work. It's the quarterback system in the future.
Well, I don't know much about this two-quarterback system.
There's not much to know. His suggestion, before you answer, his suggestion was to put Kirk Cousins and Alex Smith on the field at the same time.
Okay. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
It sounds about as great as
right.
Exactly. Yeah, it sounds about that great.
No, I'm glad I wasn't there when that was first brought
It would
up.
work with a better running quarterback in this scenario.
Yeah, they're both pretty much statues. That doesn't seem like it'd be ideal. But to the Lamar Jackson point, I'm under the assumption, and I didn't watch him play in this recent game, but it probably doesn't matter all that much because he didn't play all that much, and it was his first game. But I would think that they're going to slowly bring him along here, especially if you have a guy like Griffin that is a long-term veteran now at this point, who's played in playoff games and started a lot of regular season games. I mean, he's not going to, for the most part, blow you up completely. He has an idea. He knows what he's doing. So I would think that they're going to bring Lamar along relatively slowly, unless something drastic would happen injury-wise. I'm not necessarily against Lamar being a quality quarterback in the NFL. I think he's got quite a few skills that can actually translate well, and he will, in my mind, having watched a lot of, this is when I first started watching football, he reminds me actually a little bit more of like Donovan McNabb when he was at Syracuse, who ran quite a bit in college, but really stopped in the NFL, and he was in a much different offense from college to the NFL, which is going to be clearly the case here. And I would assume that my guess is that Lamar Jackson was not drafted to utilize his legs all that much as a quarterback. I think he's drafted to throw the ball. He's not going to be a pocket passer per se in the old sense of somebody like Tom Brady or something along those lines, but he'll move, but I would guess that he's not going to be running around the field all that much.
Right, but I guess my question is that in this situation, like I said, you know what you got with Joe Flacco, Spike, and to an extent, you pretty much know what you have out of RG3 at this point. Is it wise to do what Kansas City did last year and play Mahomes as much as they could in the preseason? That they got the fans almost too hyped for Mahomes, where every time Alex Smith made a bonehead play, they're like, get this jackass out of here. Do you want to do that with Lamar Jackson, especially since the intensity's already ramped up at this point because Flacco's been mundane the last 5 years since winning a Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a lose-lose because...
And what if he performs poorly?
Right, because, if they play him too much, then, first of all, you're not getting Flacco the reps that he needs. You're not getting RG3 familiar enough with the playbook, so you're going to have problems with... with these guys getting into a rhythm and getting, the Ravens do have some new pieces on offense, and all the names are escaping me right now, which is kind of driving me fucking
Well, they
crazy.
got Michael Crabtree.
Yes.
They got John Brown. And they drafted the two tight ends as well.
Okay. So, I mean, these are guys that Flacco has to get familiar with in order to be successful this season. And if he's not given proper time to do that during the preseason, then it's going to be a problem. If Lamar Jackson goes out there and he stinks, then the fans are going to be wondering why he's on the field even in preseason. They're going to say, why aren't you giving the time to RG3 or Flacco? And if he goes out there and does great, then that's not going to help Flacco because Flacco is your day one starter no matter what happens in
More
preseason.
than likely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you're not doing him any favors by getting the crowd against him to start a rookie who may or may not
be as good as advertised.
Right,
because let's face it, preseason he may light it up, but that's usually not against NFL top caliber
and we've
defenses.
seen that time and time again in preseason in the NFL, where somebody is gangbusters in the preseason and then they suck rocks in the regular season once it actually turns to a competitive league.
Yeah, he could be facing people right now that probably don't even make the practice squad on any team.
Yeah, I mean they're going
the Hall of
against
Fame game.
they're going against like Home Depot lumber executives in about 3 weeks.
Executives, wow, that's
Yeah.
You're really rooting for those guys that do well in life.
They're the guys that wear the ties behind the aprons.
Their ties of their favorite NFL teams.
Yeah, speaking of, that tie is ugly. All right, that's all I had to say about that. Nobody can actually see it, so they don't care. But he has a Detroit Lions tie on right now. And it's,
Hey, I'm ready for football season.
yeah, that's true. He's ready for football season so much that he's already got his noose wrapped around his neck. You talked about it. Let's jump into it. Betting preseason football. I have done it on very few occasions without actually putting too much thought, emphasis, or stock into any bet I make. It's pretty much torching money on fire. But you actually believe, Token, that there is some money to be made on betting preseason.
Absolutely. I believe at this point the books are a little vulnerable.
Lazy?
Yeah, I mean, they're not doing their full research as much as the regular season. And plus, around this time, there's some crucial MLB games to take part of. So, I mean, they're probably a little more focused on that compared to preseason football. And there's a little more variation in the betting for NFL preseason to see who you think is going to be on the field the most and who's going to have this big impact on the game the most.
You know what would be interesting to see is during the time frame of the preseason, so let's basically just say August, which takes a bigger handle, MLB baseball or preseason football?
Oh.
That'd be interesting.
Or just MLB, or preseason football versus everything else, which I guess that's just baseball, right, at this point. Or WNBA basketball still.
There's some boxing and there's probably some UFC going on, but
A little bit of golf handle, maybe.
golf, yeah.
Oh, yeah, golf handle, yeah.
PGA.
PGA's coming up this week.
Yeah.
Is NASCAR going?
NASCAR, yeah.
Is it
I
go-
think-
yeah, it is going.
I-
It goes
I
all
think-
year, I think.
I think they started their Cup Series or something like that, or it's right around the corner.
Oh, who fucking
September
knows?
16th,
I
the
don't
playoffs.
So I'm curious.
There's a wait. There's a playoffs in NASCAR?
Yeah, I don't know the first thing about it, but I know that there's a
it
playoff.
starts in Vegas.
Yeah, the Vegas got their second race, and they start the playoff
I
chase.
just drove by the billboard, so that's the only reason I know.
Yeah, it's the South Point.
Point 400.
South Point 400. Yeah, you're right.
Wow. All right.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah.
There you go. Now we've just converted a new NASCAR fan.
I didn't want to say it, but yep.
Give me,
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
give me
here.
Jimmy Johnson.
He's making a left turn.
Wait, the old coach of the Cowboys is a NASCAR driver?
Jimmy Johnson?
No, Jimmy Johnson.
That's his That's his son.
Give me Dale Earnhardt.
Yeah, he's in the Pearly Gates Cup.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, my curiosity would be what he died 20 years ago. Let it go.
Yeah, it's not like it's spoilers.
Yeah, it's not like it's too soon. Too soon. See what happened? See, Daryl Earnhardt's a product of what happens when you make a right turn. And
Thought I could go right.
so let's talk about more football here. And we talked about the Hall of Fame game. Let's talk about the Hall of Fame ceremony. Did anybody watch that at all?
I did not. I was at work. I heard minor things about it, but
I did not see it either or hear anything more about it.
Well, this is going to make for a great topic to talk about. That.
Yeah, we are
Real-
out of our depth.
Realistically, I'm not actually interested in anybody's speech except for one, and as much as I hate to give him FaceTime, Terrell Owens did his speech at the UT Chattanooga because he said that he was disrespected by all the voters of the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Fame Council, or the Hall of Fame group in itself. That we talked about this a little bit earlier. Like my thought process initially was, he should have probably gone to the ceremony and still had a ceremony on his own at the UT Chattanooga and had a celebration there, because that would have been the honorable thing to do. But when have we ever known T.O. to do the right thing in any spot that doesn't benefit him? I actually want to get your all's thoughts on, do you think that, one, I know you don't care, but two, do you think that that was the right thing to do? And if so, or if not, could we see in today's era of football players with their egos, when they inevitably, some of them make the Hall of Fame, could we see this becoming a trend where instead of going to Canton, Ohio and doing the orderly thing, they're going to start branching off, and this could become something of a satellite ceremony?
I think eventually the hall is going to crack down on it and say, if you're not giving a speech in Canton, then we're not going to air it. It's not going to get press. Or
would you even get in?
Yeah, they could potentially have that in their contracts. Like, if you get voted in the Hall of Fame, you don't make a speech unless if you're dead or medical reasons or something.
That would be an interesting caveat, yeah.
I just, and maybe I'm thinking too poorly of today's NFL player, but I feel like I could see Odell Beckham Jr. doing the exact same thing.
I could understand that. And part of it to me is actually a little bit curious because, T.O. wanted more press because T.O. always wants more press. So he did the speech outside of the Hall of Fame. Why not do both? Why not do the speech at the Hall of Fame and do the speech at your college?
Yeah, that was my point. Yeah.
Why not do both and get double the press coverage? Like, it seemed short-sighted to me more than anything.
Yeah, and it seemed like the other inductees this year took the time to thank or give a shout-out to everyone who helped them get there, whereas T.O.'s speech basically was, haha, I got here despite all the shit you said or did about, to me or about me. And basically turned his, commencement and his culmination of his entire on-the-field football career into a diss track of sorts toward everyone who didn't. And the thing is everyone who probably didn't like him or had admiration for him or respected him, it wasn't like they were just pulling that out of thin air. I mean, T.O. gave them every reason to think that way. Mm-hmm. So I really hope, and I don't mind, like I said, I don't mind if they do the Canton thing and then do their own thing, but I feel like I'm afraid that we may see a trend of, and maybe not next year and maybe not 5 years from now, but maybe
a decade or so
when this generation of NFL players is getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, I could see a situation where with technology and with egos, it could be the norm, and I'm afraid for that to happen, because the Hall of Fame ceremony, whether you think it's boring, think it needs updated, because that's what I've heard a lot of people say, it needs updated. Well, sometimes you just don't mess with tradition.
No, and it's one of those traditions that, it's very important to everybody that's in the Hall of Fame
It may be the only purest part of the game anymore.
Yeah. Actually, I remember hearing somebody's speech, and that was Urlacher's this year. Mm-hmm. And he thanked all the fans, thanked all the prior Bears that played his position, like
Singletary, Butkus,
yeah. And then he's like, and I'm one of those up there.
He didn't even want to put himself up there, even though he's now basically on equal company with them. He still was humble enough to say, I guess
first and foremost, thank the fans, which is
the reason you had a career,
yeah.
So, anyways, I don't know. My thought process was when that happened and seeing, actually, I don't know the actual truth to this, but today I was listening to some sports radio, and the amount of viewers, because I guess he streamed his speech, T.O. He actually basically almost, I don't know what the number was, but basically what they said was almost no one watched.
Oof.
Huh.
So for Terrell Owens to try to get that pub, you saw spurts of it. I saw it when I was at work. You saw spurts of it on ESPN. They didn't air the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But he had a 45-minute speech that virtually no one watched.
Yeah, that sounds like too much T.O., 45 minutes.
Yeah, probably so.
It does seem like a very long speech, yeah.
It would be great, though, if he started his speech with, get your popcorn ready.
That'd be a very interesting introduction.
Yeah, so, I don't know. We'll see. So, I don't want to circle back to too much Urban Meyer, but we talked about domestic violence. And one of those, when you talked about, the season starting and it going away, actually made me think about whatever happened with the LaShawn McCoy situation. With the whole beating his wife or ordering a hit on his wife. It just went away. I didn't think about that until you guys talked about it. The season's starting, we need to get distractions. And even though the NFL season hasn't started, there's been enough distractions in the NFL with whatever, that LaShawn McCoy's potential career ruiner of a hit job is just gone. And look, I'm not here to try to like nationally start this back up again. I just thought about that basically when you were saying, hey, look, distractions can completely erase the thought of what you did.
Yeah, I mean, that just proves the point. There's just that, and everything's so cyclical that as soon as they've either done the story to death or something else comes out or there's some other story to distract us, the news media is going to move on because that, whatever it was, regardless of how heinous it may have been, is now yesterday's news or last week's news, and they're trying something else.
Yeah, I mean, the news is always going to look for something that's always going to get hits and views and all that, and the attention that people like are something that's fresh, something that's new that they haven't heard about, not just something, a reference or a rerun, or they want the new best next thing and what's relevant. Even though it's still relevant,
well, that's the question. Is it relevant anymore? Until they go to court.
Yeah, the public right now just likes hearing what's new, fresh, and anything that they can get their hands on almost.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. It just seemed weird to me because I was like, thinking about it, when he said, hey, the season starts, all distractions will overmax this, and life will go on with our news cycle, and kind of had a point there. So let's talk about some NFL coaches, and I know that those, there's a few coaches that I was thinking about this week who, it's easy to talk about who is on the hot seat every year, and there's a couple coaches I think that are on the hot seat that many wouldn't really think about at this point because, well, the teams have been historically better than in spots where coaches would normally get fired. And the first one that comes to my mind is actually Mike Tomlin. I think Mike Tomlin might have the hottest seat in the NFL this year.
I completely agree with that. He is just underperformed with somebody who, with Roethlisberger as a quarterback, Roethlisberger,
Bell is a running back and Brown is a wide receiver.
Roethlisberger is really fucking good. He always gets overlooked because of the Bradys and the Rodgers of the world.
Not by Token. Token said Roethlisberger was better than Rodgers.
Yeah.
In fairness to you, sir, I think Ben Roethlisberger is a tier 1 quarterback, but I think Aaron Rodgers is there too. Anyways, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, and that's
enough
fine.
assessment.
I do to have that kind of talent and to not be able to advance. What was the last Super Bowl they were in? 2009?
Against the Packers that they lost, whenever that was.
Yeah.
I think it was 9 or 10 or something like that, yeah.
2009-22. Whenever it's been far too long with that lineup to not have made it that far. It's just it's win or go home. Like if Tomlin doesn't win the whole thing, even if he makes the Super Bowl, I think he still gets fired.
Wow.
13-3 last year. Come on.
No, that's the problem. Is that
that's not good enough at this point.
Exactly. That is routine for that team. They went 13-3. They should have been 15-1. This is not a team. This is not a team that can have this kind of roster that continues to age, that doesn't get there. They have to win now, or else Tomlin has to go.
I'm with you 90% of the way. I think if they don't have an AFC Championship appearance, and if they don't get blown out in that AFC Championship appearance, he keeps his job, or he gets fired. If they make the AFC and lose a tough game to whoever, then I think he keeps his job. Anything worse than that, a blowout in the AFC Championship or worse, I think he's gone as well. So, but and to be honest with you, I mean that division isn't great. I mean, we talk about the Ravens and their quarterback situation. The Browns, as much as they did this offseason, aren't like
they're 5-11 at best.
They aren't 1,000% better as far as total wins. They may be 500% better at best, but. Another guy I thought, when I was thinking about this, is Pete Carroll.
Okay. That's one I wasn't thinking about, but
I think Pete Carroll, with everything that has gone on since that Super Bowl, I mean, it's hard-pressed to believe that anything has gone positive for the Seattle Seahawks since that Malcolm Butler interception. I mean, if anybody can figure out anything, please let me know. But I feel like even though they went 9-7 last year, the Legion of Boom is virtually gone. Mm-hmm. I think Pete Carroll's message is falling on deaf ears at this point to everyone not named Russell Wilson. I think that Seattle is drastically worse than they were even up to last year, and I think that 8-8 may be their season, and I think that's enough that Pete Carroll probably will lose his job this year if he's 8-8 or worse, or if he's doesn't make the postseason, which 8-8 or worse would not do. But
I mean, it'd be tough to.
But I think even another 9-7 season may be enough. Yeah, he may not keep his job with another 9-7 season. And again, this I'm not in the minds of general managers, and this may or may not be accurate, but I think that, if they get out to, 2-5 start, or God forbid, even like a 1-3 start,
he might be gone by then. Yeah.
No, but he may feel intense amount of pressure, and that may snowball on him and the season. Because for what the talent they did have, a lot of it they lost. I mean, Sherman's gone, Chancellor's retired, Earl Thomas wants out, Jimmy Graham's gone. Doug Baldwin's still their best receiver, but I don't think they added anything really to complement him. They made what many believe to be a bonehead move in the first round by taking Rashad Penny instead of filling other needs like offensive line or getting one of the better running backs that were on the board. So they haven't really done anything to earn the good graces of Seattle Seahawks fans since appearing in that Super Bowl. What was that, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
4 years ago, but they haven't had a losing record, and to me, it would be.
But right, I mean,
you'd have to be a disastrous year.
But sometimes expectations are higher than actual
Tony
levels.
Like 6-10 or something, or
I'm sorry.
Or are you thinking Tony? Like
I think 7. I think 7-9. If the office is thinking about going in a different direction, I think 7-9 or 8-8 would do it.
Wow. Yeah, I mean,
I'm not saying it's 100. I'm not speaking in
fine.
absolutes. But
it could be a possibility.
I'm always surprised by things.
Because I will tell you, the next guy I'm about to tell you about is the true definition of you cannot speak in absolutes, and that's Jason Garrett. Every year, I feel like he would be on this list. Yes. But if they get a full season out of Zeke and Dak and that offensive line, I think the hodgepodge of receivers they have will make a lot of people forget about Dez, because I think the average of all the receivers at one time is really good. Or not really good, but it is pretty good. And I think they won't miss Dez. If Sean Lee can stay healthy, the defense is good. And if all of those things happen and they don't perform, if they go 8-8 or even I would say even 9-7, with all of those things happening, Zeke fully healthy, Prescott, playing average football, and the defense all being healthy, and they produce an 8-8 season, I think Jason Garrett might finally be gone at that point.
I'm with you there, 100%.
Yeah.
He's never gotten over the hump.
I'm surprised he's never.
Why is he still even the head coach?
Well, that's been the question for 3-4 years now.
Yeah, it's really
I think
shocking.
last year was his most legitimate case for staying.
Yeah.
With the whole Zeke thing and the whole Dez Bryant thing.
I don't know.
And the offensive line actually having injuries last year. Tyron Smith, the left tackle, was injured most of the year. So
yeah, he missed like 10 games or something.
Yeah, something like that. But last year, out of the last 4, was probably his only legitimate cause for staying. But you could make a case that says, well, he shouldn't even have been there for this season. So. Mm-hmm. Another guy, obviously, on the hot seat this year, again, provided that his quarterback stays healthy, is Mike McCarthy.
That's one of those that I was thinking about for sure. I mean, I don't see Rodgers taking a big toll on injury again, whether it's
bad for the league when he's injured, trust me.
Yeah.
And whether you like him or you hate him, it's bad for the league when a superstar
he
like
has
that
our numbers, though. I mean, but everybody's got our numbers, so it's irrelevant.
Yeah. And another one, you guys feel free to bash me or praise me. I'm hoping for the latter. But if this team does not perform as they're expected to, I think this guy could be fired, is Mike Zimmer in Minnesota.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's interesting.
Because I think
that's not who I was thinking, but
with the 3-year deal that they have for Kirk Cousins and locking up Diggs, locking up Thielen, you got Cook on a rookie deal, and that defense, the time is now for Minnesota.
Yeah.
And an 8-8 season or something like that. That might get him fired, because they may say we need to bring somebody in. It's almost like a Tony Dungy mentality back in 2001. He kept getting. He had a fantastic defense, a great offense, and he just kept hitting a wall. And then they brought Gruden in, and Gruden busted through that wall. I can see a situation where Zimmer keeps hitting this point, and they're saying we basically have 2 more years with Cousins and the rest of this roster.
Yeah.
We need to go now. So I could see in a situation where them failing to make the playoffs this year could cost Mike Zimmer his job.
That's a stretch, I think.
Like I said, preseason, I don't think he's on the hot seat because everything's optimism right now.
Right,
but
yeah,
I think under wraps secretly he's on a hot seat to perform with this team.
I don't know. I think he brought enough good graces through last year that this year, even an 8-8 type season, I don't think hurts him. I think maybe that puts him under a heavier microscope for the following season.
Okay, fair.
But
I mean, with Case Keenum, he took him to the NFC title game, and I think with their rendition of an upgraded quarterback, which, I mean, let's face it, he is. I mean, I still don't think Kirk Cousins is an elite quarterback.
Not even close.
Right, but he's better than Case Keenum at that point. I think with an NFC title game appearance and upgrading your quarterback, I think Minnesota Vikings fans have Pittsburgh Steelers fans' expectations at this point.
I would lean towards that as well. I think 8-8 could get him the boot. I mean, realistically, if Cook stays healthy, if their offensive line stays moderate, I think they're at least going to win that division.
Fucking guy looks like a walking mini mart. He's got a can of Pringles, a bag of chili chips or whatever those are, jalapeno chips,
ghost pepper chips,
and Starbucks coffee.
The big one. I see the big one too. Nice.
Yeah. So, anyways, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, I think 8-8 can give them the boot because I think they've got all their pieces intact, and they're in a somewhat easy division. I mean, the Bears are still starting to build upwards. I mean, they've gotten better over the offseason in my mind. You still have the Lions that are the Lions.
I think the Bears are 7-9 or better. Anybody want to take that bet?
Oh, I would actually agree with you on that.
Come on.
Anybody want to take that?
Bears at 7-9.
Bears over 6.5 wins.
I would take that. I would take the over.
Anybody want to fade me?
I would take the over in that.
What's the actual total? What is that?
It's 6.5 wins.
Is it really?
I think
I'm
it is.
betting the under on that sucker.
God, you guys should check the Vegas Squares Twitter. I've already tweeted about it.
Oh.
I actually like the over as well. I actually think the Bears have a legit shot to.
Anybody want to fade me on that?
Yeah, I'll fade you. I'm with Spike. I will. Fade
I think they have a
all day.
legit shot to make a maybe possible division push. Maybe.
I don't think division, but I think they can.
What are you guys
I think they can. I think they can make a playoff spot. We'll talk about that later.
All right.
But yeah, no. Like I said, it's not necessarily the fairest situation for Mike Zimmer, but nobody said life's fair at this point. You've got expectations. You've got a roster, barring catastrophic injuries to your major skill position players. I think an 8-8 season or worse, or even almost that may be a bit more of a stretch, but even a missed playoff berth could cost Mike Zimmer the job. Only because the front office has a small window.
I could see if they go into the last game, it's a must-win game to make the playoffs or win the division or something like that. And
right. If they miss a playoff berth by a Week 17 game, I think the percentage of them getting fired is less than 1. But what I'm saying is if they're 8-8 and they're never really, if they start out, because they got to play a first place schedule this year too, as well. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they're playing the AFC East and the NFC South, on top of Philadelphia and the Rams. I could be wrong, but I think that's exactly their schedule.
Oh, yeah,
on top of their own division. But they've got a tough schedule ahead of them, and there's a chance.
They play the 49ers, Bills, Rams.
Okay, so they play the
Eagles.
NFC West.
Yeah.
And the who else? What was the AFC division they play? Do they play New England? They play New England, shouldn't they?
New England and the Dolphins, yeah.
So they play the
East.
NFC West and the AFC East. Two pretty tough divisions.
How the fuck is the AFC East tough? It's New England.
They play
and
in
shit.
They play in Miami. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Miami's always tough.
Miami's always tough in Miami when it's fucking hot.
When are they playing in Miami?
They play in
October.
They play in Minnesota.
Okay, fair enough. All right, I'll take back the AFC East.
There's a big difference there. It really is.
Yeah, I'll take back the AFC East Patriots are decent. The Bills could give them. Where they play the Bills in the Buffalo?
No, in Minnesota.
Fuck. Well, never mind. My argument shot for the AFC East. Fair enough. The NFC West is a tough division, though.
Yes, I'll give you that.
And their own division, I would say, with the Packers twice and my new upstart Bears twice.
I literally, as you were talking, I bet the under on the Bears win total.
Good
bet.
Why can't you just fade me
what
for even money?
What
No,
value?
because I got plus 125 there.
See, doesn't that alarm you that the under is plus 125?
No, not at all. That's free money.
All right. Then give me some free money then.
Make it rain.
So, anyways, those are my thoughts on coaches who are on the hot seat. Some more obvious than others, clearly.
All right, so going back to Minnesota again, they end the year against Detroit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, maybe it'll end in a tie. See what I did there?
What if they lose to them for the division? Do you think he loses his job
Well,
against shitty Detroit?
again, if Detroit's playing for the division, they're not shitty this year. Didn't they almost win the division, 2 or 3 years ago before
2
they
years
lost
ago.
5 in a row or something?
They lost the last 3, and Minnesota had to win the last 3.
Yeah.
Or no,
Green
Green Bay.
Bay, yeah.
I had the Lions to win the division that year.
And the thing is, and honestly, balls bouncing one way or another, and the parity of the league is not as widespread as everybody likes to make it. The couple 50-50 balls go one way or the other. I don't think Chicago's going to win the division, but I think any team in that division could win. Injuries, 50-50s, and just the rate of a season. Because a lot of times, sometimes, I've been studying a lot of the schedules for a lot of the teams, and there's a lot of situations where good teams have very taxing schedules in the beginning of the year. And sometimes getting out to a 2-4 start can snowball into a bad season. So, I mean, just because a team, the Patriots have a really tough opening 6 games, and the last 10 they could go 10-0. They could realistically start 3-3 and then finish 10-0. Same. A lot of the schedules are set up where a lot of these teams could start out. Cincinnati's another one, I think. If they're improved as much as I think they are, they could start out 1-5 and finish the season 11-5.
That was actually the team I was going to ask. How come you did not mention Marv Lewis as being on the hot seat? I know he just got a contract extension.
He got a 2-year contract. I think it's a bridge deal for something. I don't know. I can't figure out Marvin Lewis. I don't think he's ever really on the hot seat.
I can't believe he's been there that long.
After 18 years, he had to resign and then got re-signed.
Yeah, I just
Been in the playoffs once or twice in that long. It doesn't make any sense.
He hasn't won a playoff game, and I think he's been 2 or 3 times.
Absolute disaster.
But I think he can get them to the playoffs. I think it all goes on Dalton because they're Dalton, and if Tyler Eifert can remain healthy, he is a huge he's a Gronk type player. He's a huge asset to Andy Dalton if he can stay healthy.
completely agree, but I mean, they need to win games, especially we were just talking about how that division is down with the Ravens and the Browns.
I don't see a reason. Again, the division is down. All the teams are slightly improved, though, in my opinion, even though the division still seems as a whole down except for Pittsburgh. They're the class of the division. There's not a reason why Cincinnati, if they have improved and they can navigate a season, why they can't go 5-1 in that division. They could beat Cleveland twice, they could beat Baltimore twice, and they could split a home and home with the Steelers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, everybody wants to, talk about, there's a lot more factors than just the talent on the field. I mean, as far as a season, when you play somebody matters. Obviously, injuries matter, and sometimes, you getting out to a slow start or getting out to a hot start. I like Herm Edwards' always take. It was win a quarter of the season. If you can go 3-1 every quarter of the season, you'll have a job forever.
Yeah,
he couldn't live on his promise.
You'll make the playoffs if not win the division.
If you go 3-1
time.
every quarter of the season, you should win a division every year.
Yeah,
Obviously easier said than done.
98% of the time, if not more.
Yeah, obviously easier said than done, but I just like that mentality of a football season. Win, treat it like 4-game stretches and try to win 3 of them.
No, that seems pretty legit going at that point. Yeah.
So, anyways,
another one on my hot seat that I'm surprised you didn't mention was Jay Gruden with the Redskins.
well, I think he's on my hot seat. My list was people who I actually thought people would be like, no, there's no way he's on the hot seat.
You're trying to be
okay.
controversial, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, I was trying
Understandable.
to take a stance of at this point in the season, things are high for Pittsburgh, things are high for Minnesota. Dallas is Dallas.
Yeah.
Things are high for the Packers with Rodgers coming back. My thought process on my list, there's a lot of coaches on the hot seat. Dirk Cutter in Tampa Bay. I think even Adam Gase in Miami, now with Tannehill coming back. There's a lot of coaches on the hot seat.
Vance Joseph, too, for sure.
Vance Joseph after his performance last year, 5-11.
Another disaster.
My point being is there's coaches who you could easily put on the my list was coaches who may not be the normal pick there.
The number one targets, yeah.
Jay Gruden, I don't think that team is going to be any better than it was last year because I think Alex Smith, while capable, I think lost a few weapons. And it remains to be seen if, I don't know how to say this guy's name, I think it's Darius Geis, the guy they drafted, the running back.
Yeah.
Yes.
If he could be anything to improve a running game. I don't think they're any better than last year, and I believe they went 7-9 last year, so I think he's on a hot seat in a sense of, I think it's the final year of his contract, so he just may not be renewed.
Fair enough.
So, there are definitely probably half the league on a hot seat. That's an easy take on that one, but my thought process was guys who may not be, a name you think of who should be sitting there at this point in the season. So.
Understandable.
Anywho, that's going to wrap it up for us. We appreciate you tuning in. I should thank the sponsors, considering I didn't in the beginning. And we want to thank 12 Ounce Radio for airing us every week. We want to thank Chai Poker, and hopefully the guys over at Chai Poker are safe in their... What are they doing, Token? I know you know.
I believe they're in Prague or something.
Prague? Okay, so safe in their trip to Prague. And we want to thank... the VGK Pop Sockets, they made a sale from clicking a link off of one of our tweets.
Shit.
Yeah.
Nice.
So,
wow.
Yeah. Marketing geniuses, us Vegas Squares are. And I want to say a special happy birthday to Spike over here.
Fuck.
I think he's like 64.
Yeah.
64.
Close.
Yeah.
Something like that. Thank you.
Botox is a hell of a drug. But anyways, for Spike, for Token Tony, for Tony Johnson, I'm Aaron. We appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one. We are out.